Transporting the dead is supposed to be routine. These drivers learned it never really is. Story 1. I have driven funeral vans for nearly a decade, and the roads have memorized the weight of my cargo more than the mileage on the odometer. The night I'm thinking of now was a humid October, the kind that clings to the windshield and refuses to melt even after the engine warms. I was hauling Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove, married for 57 years, a simple wooden casket and a steel urn, both sealed, both quiet. The van rolled out of the chapel under a rain-spattered sky, the mourner's footsteps already fading behind the polished doors. The interior was dark, lit only by a dim strip of fluorescent light under the rear seats, the kind that hums just enough to remind you something is alive. I turned the key, and the engine purred, a low, steady sound that seemed to swallow the distant sobs. The highway stretched ahead, a ribbon of black asphalt lit intermittently by flickering street lamps. I kept the radio off. The silence inside the cab is a different sort of presence, an absence that fills you. The road ahead was empty, but for a stray cat darting across, its eyes briefly reflecting the lamp before it vanished into the night. About 10 miles out, the van's rear door creaked open just a fraction, 1 millimeter perhaps, enough that a cold draft swept across the casket. I felt it on the back of my neck before I saw it. I pulled over, the brakes whispering against the damp pavement, and checked the latch. It was sealed. Still, the weight of the moment settled heavier than the steel of the door. I turned the key in the ignition again, the engine whining back to life. The cab's heater hissed, a thin plume of steam rising from the dashboard. The road ahead was silent again, save for the faint rhythm of rain dripping off the windshield. As I eased back onto the highway, a low, almost imperceptible hum began to rise, not from the engine, but from the casket itself. It was a faint, irregular thump, like a heartbeat that had missed a beat and was trying to find its rhythm again. I frowned, glancing at the rear-view mirror. The back seat was empty, the dim light catching the polished wood of the casket. The thump persisted, growing in cadence, as if something inside were adjusting, shifting, aligning itself. I stopped the van at a lay-by, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead, and stepped out. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, a scent that reminded me of the hospital's surgical tables. I walked around the side of the van, pressed my palm against the cold metal of the casket. It was solid, unyielding. Yet as I stood there, the radio, which I hadn't turned on, crackled to life on its own, a burst of static that seemed to echo the thump. A voice, faint, garbled, like an old telephone line, whispered something indecipherable. The sound faded as quickly as it had arrived, leaving only the rain and my own breath. I got back into the driver's seat, the engine now a steady, ordinary rumble. The road stretched ahead, unchanged, and the casket remained still, the thump gone. I drove the remaining miles in a quiet that felt heavier than the one before. When I finally pulled up at the cemetery, the gates were closed, the night deep, and a lone caretaker stood by the stone entrance, his silhouette a dark blot against the faint glow of his lantern. He didn't speak as I lifted the casket. I placed it gently onto the dolly, feeling the wood's coldness under my gloved hands. As I turned to leave, a distant dog barked once, a single sharp note that cut through the night. The silence returned, thick and impenetrable, as if the world held its breath for the final moments of a life already spent. I drove home, the rain now a gentle patter, the engine's hum the only sound. The road seemed longer, the darkness deeper, and I could still hear, faintly, that irregular thump reverberating in the back of my mind, a reminder that some things never truly settle. Story 2. The van's fridge hummed like a dissatisfied wasp. I adjusted the rearview mirror, checking the silver body bag sprawled in the back, just a faint ripple beneath the plastic, like a breath held too long. My first solo run since earning my certificate. The dispatcher had called it a straightforward transport, but the air in the cab tasted damp, metallic, as though the van itself had bled. I merged onto the highway, the body's weight shifting faintly behind me. Don't think about that, I told myself. Bodies don't shift. The temperature gauge flickered. 39 degrees Celsius, steady. Or so I told myself until my breath clouded the windshield. A sea vents hissed, but the mist clung. Then the van went quiet. No engine rumble, no hum, just a vacuum-sealed stillness. I slammed the brake, heart jackhammering, but the fridge suddenly whined to life, twice as loud as before. The body bag shuddered. I didn't dare look back. My hands shook the steering wheel, grip white-knuckled, until the road ahead splintered into tree shadows. When I risked a glance, the bag was open. A corner of the zip had peeled, like it had been gnawed. The corpse wasn't mine. The paperwork said Jane Doe, 28, accidental overdose, but this woman's hair was damp, slick to the neck, as though submerged. Her hands, why had I noticed the hands, were curled into loose fists, fingers twitching like tendrils toward the bag's edge. I yanked the zipper shut, but the van's temperature gauge now read 44 degrees Celsius. My own breath felt hot, sour. The radio crackled to life. "Everything okay back there?" The dispatcher's voice was syrup-thick, static-laced. Just the equipment check," I lied. "ETA 10 minutes. Her corpse's face swam in my mind. Waxy, slack-jawed, eyes sealed. Yet I'd swear her right eyelid had flickered. A trick of the fluorescent morgue lights? Fatigue? The van's fridge died again, plunging the cab into a silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. Then the Chow G came. Not a knock. A tap, soft as a fingernail against plastic. Rhythm. Once. Twice. Pause. Once. My knuckles hit the dash. The body bag hung open again. Her hand hovered just above the edge, palm upturned, as though asking for something. A name? A prayer? The van lurched forward, engine roaring back to life. I floored the accelerator, tires screeching as I skidded into the funeral home's lot. A man in a tailored suit waited, face grim. "Ms. Vasquez?" he asked. Yes. But the body—" He cut me off, hand outstretched. "They said you'd need directions." I handed over the clipboard, staring at the open van door. The body bag was sealed. The temperature, 39 degrees Celsius. But when I turned back, the man was gone. In the parking lot mirror, the van's rear window pulsed with a faint, wet stain, like a fingerprint or a face pressed against the glass. I never worked that van again. Story 3. The refrigerated van hummed like a dying thing, its compressor wheezing in the pre-dawn dark. I'd been driving for 2 hours, ferrying a body from a small town north of the city to the morgue. The dead don't care about rush hour, I reminded myself. They just need to stay cold. Passenger seat beside me lay the body bag, zipped to the top, labeled minor victim in black Sharpie. The child's name, Lena, was scrawled on a tag around the bag's neck. I'd been told to keep the van at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but the digital readout flickered between 42 and 45. The thermostat was faulty, I decided. The van was 20 years old. Everything about it creaked and failed. I glanced at the rear view. The bag was still. "Always check twice," my supervisor said. "You're the last line before decay." I peered through the back hatch's frosted glass. A faint shape, the contour of a small body, unmoving. The highway blurred past. My radio crackled but held no stations. Silence seeped in, thick as the cold. I adjusted the rear vents, blasting cool air into the cabin. The van smelled like antifreeze and lilies. Then the temperature dropped. The display plunged to 32 degrees Fahrenheit and kept falling, 30, 25, 20, before halting at 15 degrees Fahrenheit. My breath fogged the wheel. The compressor screamed, then stopped. The van's lights dimmed. I slammed the thermostat, but it didn't budge. I reached for the rear handle, my heartbeat thrumming in my throat. Needed to check the unit's fuse box. The back door groaned open. The body bag was open. A arm, tiny and pale, lay half out, fingers splayed against the floor. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I yanked the bag shut, zipping it with a violence that made the metal teeth screech. My pulse didn't steady until I'd slammed the door and restarted the engine. The thermostat climbed back to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal. Probably a glitch. I told myself to stop watching true crime documentaries. But the van grew colder again after that. Not the thermostat, the air itself. A chill that pressed against my neck, my wrists, as if something were breathing slow, measured breaths in the cargo hold. At the morgue, I transferred Lena with gloved hands, my eyes on the floor. The attendants didn't notice the second zipper tooth missing from the bag, or the faint drag mark on the van's linoleum. They just nodded, logging the time of arrival. Before leaving, I circled the van. The back door hung ajar, though I'd locked it. Inside, frost clung to the walls in thick, feathery clumps. I ran the heater. Ichuichu Dareichi was warm, but the van never felt warm again. They called me the next week. Lena's autopsy showed no signs of rigor, but her organs had frostbite. Impossible, they said. The van's temperature logs, they added, showed nothing but steady 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I drive a different route. Deliver flowers mostly. But sometimes, in the rear view, I swear I see a small hand tapping the back window. When I pull over, there's never anything there. Just the cold, settling in.